Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Phil.
How are you?
Good. Good. Should I start letting people in?
What's that?
Should I go ahead and start letting them in?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, very good. Are you gonna mention the recording thing, and I'll?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We're gonna be recorded. Yeah.
Yeah. People were asking for the people who couldn't show up, so.
Okay.
There we go. I'm letting them in.
Thanks for arranging all this too.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hello, David.
How you doing,
Martha.
Bill?
I think everybody's set to mute, so just FYI. Feel free to chat, though.
Vince. Hello, Vince. How are you? Hi, Sharon. Linda. Hello, Linda.
Hi, Rachel. This is Vince. I will manage the attendance. If you need me to do anything else, let me know, but I'll keep track of attendance. I've got
Thanks, Vince.
list printed.
I appreciate it.
Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hey. Rename. Okay.
Pruitt. There it is. Good to meet you.
Hey, I'm on the East Coast. Does anyone know where I can get some gas? If you do,
I
call
think it's
me.
God's message. I think it's God's message to just stay home and walk to where you need to go.
Mike, I think you can find some in Houston.
Yeah, Tucson. We got Tucson, $2.99.
Phoenix has plenty.
Let's back up. Logan, I gotta see that painting. I need to see Logan.
It's Vince.
What do you need to do? What do you need?
Oh, there it is. There it is. It's my lotto dream. Right there. Right there.
Got the vineyard.
The only reason I buy lotto tickets is to buy that place.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? That vineyard on the hill.
It lives. I know, and the whole shebang, and it encaps. You know, when I only buy lotto tickets when there's some reason to buy them, and all I need to do is see or think of that or dream of it. I've dreamt of that.
Yeah,
place.
my
So
daughter
many
paint-
times.
Yeah, that's the watercolor prepared by my daughter from a photo I took. I just love that.
So thank her for me, please.
Okay.
Oh, lots of people here tonight. It's good.
I see a lot of familiar faces.
All smiling too.
So far.
Ouch. Ouch, Bill. Oh.
We've got about 22 participants so far. Vince, did you happen to run the report to see? The last time I checked, there was about 36 folks that had registered.
Half hour ago it was 56.
Okay.
So we'll probably have 60 or so, something like that.
All right.
Yeah, my guess. I think you're right, Vince.
Or at least that's how many registered. So we may not have everybody present.
Sure.
Victor's here. Hello, Victor.
Hey, Victor. Victor, we're still letting people in, just so you know.
You're on mute, I think.
Oh.
Or we can't hear you. Give it a couple more minutes, Rachel.
Yeah, I think so. There's only about 24 right now. So I assume there's going to be a flood of people, just a little bit. I have 5:31. So if you guys can hold on for maybe another minute or two, Victor, then we can get started. It
Here's
is
my
great.
version of that house on the hill in the fall. See all the leaves? The red
Yeah,
colors.
Oh, that's a beautiful phrase, the house on the hill. I mean, I think that it's like that tree. We all know that tree, the tree on the meseta that we all have a photograph of. The house on the hill, the meseta tree. You know, there's certain iconic. Oh, and there's the padrone, the Alta de Padrone. Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. I want to walk. I only got 6 miles so far today. I got it.
Better get those in before it gets too hot.
Oh well, it's yeah. I usually get up at 4 and have my coffee, and then I walk I try to get 5 miles in early. The dog is getting older and he complains now. He's not as excited about walking as he used to be. It's pretty sad. And then I try to get a little bit in after dinner, but I don't know. You guys take precedence, I think, for today. I'll forgive myself.
Maybe we don't, but I think Victor takes precedent. Victor, I haven't seen you since the fresh market.
I know, it's good to see you, David. You run a great club. You have a lot going on.
Yeah.
I travel quite a bit, so I'm not around that much, but I'll try to make one.
Yeah, I understand.
David, have you been doing more socially distanced ones with just Zoom calls, more or less?
Yes.
Not the coffee shop?
Yeah. Yeah. Today was the first coffee shop day.
Wow, that's exciting.
Outside. Yeah.
Exciting.
We had 9 show up.
That's really good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got about 30 people right now, and it's three after our start time. Would you like to go ahead and get started? Since we have about an hour here.
All right, we can.
Okay.
I have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker for tonight, Victor Prince. Victor is a managing director of Discovered Logic LLC, a management consulting, coaching, and training firm that serves clients in the U.S. and overseas. He has 20 plus years of experience in corporate and government leadership positions. As a Bain and Company consultant, he led strategy engagements with clients in the U.S., UK, France, and Spain. As an executive at Capital One, he managed internet marketing strategy. And as a member of Washington, D.C. Mayor Fenty's cabinet, he led the CapStat Performance Accountability Program. And as chief operating officer of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, he led a division of 300 plus people. Victor has an MBA from Wharton and a BA from American University. And he is the author of The Camino Way. So I thought he would be a good guy to talk to all of us, particularly about his experiences on the Camino and leadership. So the combination of both. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Victor.
All right, hold on, let me share my screen real quick. All right, do you see a slide with a map?
Yes.
Perfect. So there was this 44-year-old man in Boston, and he had to take a business trip to Paris. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Good. So this 44-year-old man in Boston had to take a business trip to Paris, and he happened to have a 12-year-old son who was gifted, intellectually gifted. So he talked to his wife about it, and they decided it would be a real good opportunity for him to take his son on the trip with him to open his eyes to some broader horizons. So they booked passage. Now, they booked a ship. Now, unfortunately, the man's employer wasn't the most deep pockets. So they booked a ship to Paris, and when they got about halfway, the ship sprung a leak, and everyone on board, the passengers, the crew, everyone had to bail out the ship hand by hand, bucket by bucket, to keep the ship afloat and prevent all hands from being lost in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So the good news was somehow they made it to land, but the bad news was they made it to land about 1,000 miles short of Paris on the northwest corner of Spain, but they were just glad to be alive. So now they had to figure out how to get to Paris because they still had the trip to do. And understandably, they weren't excited about getting on a ship again. But the good news was that where they landed, there happened to be a trail system that all ended right by where they landed in this town called Santiago de Compostela. And there was a well-established hiking trail that walked all the way up to Paris. So they decided to take that trail, and they hired a mule train, and they completed their trip to Paris by walking backwards on this trail. And in many ways, that trip, that walking on that trail, changed their lives. And they both wrote about it later in their lives. And they talked about what they saw along the trail, the great poverty, and the impact of that. And they saw what a government and a church really intertwined had, and how that really shaped the culture of a country, and it had a big impact on them. And in many ways, I would argue that trip didn't just change their lives. I'd argue that it changed the history of the world, because that wasn't any father and son. That was John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Yeah. And the year was 1779. And the business trip was, John Adams was being sent by the Continental Congress to go to Paris to negotiate a peace treaty with Great Britain in the American Revolutionary War. In many ways, I'd argue that if that boat had sunk, that the world history, American history certainly, but world history may have been very different. So that changed their lives, changed history's lives. But for me, it also, the Camino, the route that they walked on, called the Camino de Santiago, changed my life as well, because I walked it 224 years later, and there was about almost 300,000 people walking it with me. And it had such an impact on me that I ended up writing a book about it. And the book's called The Camino Way, Lessons in Leadership from a Walk Across Spain. And it came out in 2017 with Amicom, and which is now HarperCollins Leadership. And it's since been translated into Spanish, Chinese, and Korean's coming out next. And it's now in public libraries in 44 of the 50 US states and in 20 countries in every continent except Antarctica. So the book, the lessons I've learned had a big impact to me, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to share those with a lot of other people. And would like to do today is share about a dozen of those lessons that I learned from the Walking Across Spain on the Camino de Santiago. But first, it's probably worth sharing. So to give a little background, this is a keynote address that I do with a lot of different clients. So corporate clients, others, and I tailor this address based on what their values are, and I'll pick and choose different values. But you might recognize some of these. The values I talk about, the lessons, were inspired in a great deal by the back of the passport that the APOC issues and the spirit of the Camino. So you'll probably see that as a theme through here. But so I'm talking a little bit to a captive audience because you guys know about the Camino, but I'll just keep going there, going with how I do this. So I usually give here a history of the Camino. I say it's about 1,000 years of history in about 3 minutes. So somewhere around the year 830 AD or so, a priest in the northwest corner of Spain had reports of strange noises and lights outside of his church. So he went to investigate. And when he got up in the hills, he found a grave. And he declared that grave to contain the remains of St. James, or Sant Iago, as he's known in Spanish. So he created a shrine. The shrine became a church, and the church would eventually become a great cathedral. And a big city of about 100,000 people today would sprout out around it, called Santiago de Compostela. And after he built the shrine, people from all over modern day Spain and Portugal started to come to visit it. And about 100 years later, in the year 950 AD, a bishop in a little town in France called Le Puy had heard about this shrine as well. And he walked over 800 miles to come see for himself. And by doing so, he became the first recorded peregrino or pilgrim to walk the Camino de Santiago, or the way to Santiago, the way to St. James, from a country outside of Iberia. And after he came, more people started coming from the region. And then in the year 1140 AD, a book came out called the Codex Calixtinus, and that really increased the popularity of the Camino, because it was a book in Latin, and it was mostly about the miracles of St. James. But there was one specific part about the logistics of walking on the way to St. James, on the way to the Camino de Santiago. It talked about where to get water, where to stay. It even had mention of the souvenir trade, which is one of the earliest mentions we've seen of that. So in many ways, people call that book the Codex Calixtinus, and the section on travel to Santiago de Compostela as the first travel guide in Western history. So after the book came out, interest started to explode. We started to get pilgrims coming all the way from Sweden, from Germany, from Italy, from England. Many pilgrims would take the journey and leave journals. Some would be recorded on the ship's manifest and other things. So we just see an explosion of people walking all the way from their homes to Santiago de Compostela in Spain, starting in really the year 1140, and afterwards is when the growth really takes place. And we don't have exact numbers, but we know that the peak was probably right around the Reformation in the early 1500s. And we do have a couple numbers which give us a sense of magnitude of how many people were walking the Camino. So, for example, in the 1600s, there was a log from Roncesvalles, one of the hostels along the way, that recorded over 16,000 people staying in a year just at that one hostel. And this is in the 1600s, well after the peak of the Camino. So whatever the number was, it was probably tens of thousands, if not six figures of people walking the Camino every year for centuries after the Codex Calixtinus came out in 1140. And then the Camino, people continued walking the Camino all the way through all the wars in Europe, the dictatorships, the religious strife, the Reformation, and all that. But by the year 1979, only about 70 pilgrims were recorded as finishing the Camino de Santiago, making it all the way into the cathedral. But then in 1985, another book came out written by a priest who lived along the Camino in Crucifero. And after the book came out, more interest was sparked again. Then some celebrities started walking it, writing books, making movies. And then in the year 2010, 2011, Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez did a movie called The Way, which really grew the interest in the Camino from English-speaking countries, the US, Canada, and elsewhere. And then so by 2019, over 340,000 people had been recorded as finishing at least the last 100 kilometers on foot or 200 kilometers on bike, finishing the Camino and walking into Santiago de Compostela. So that's about 1,000 years of history in 3 minutes on what the Camino is. And so as you walk the Camino, you're kind of asked to live by some lessons in the spirit of the Camino. So the American pilgrims on the Camino, as you all are very familiar with, they issue the American passport. And if you get that, on the back, there's a list called the Spirit of the Camino, and it's 7 simple values that pilgrims are kind of asked to live by while they're on the Camino. And that really, as I found that on my first Camino, I've walked 5 Caminos over the years now, but on my first Camino, that really had an impact on me, and it helped me, inspired me to write the book and go from there. So one of the first lessons that you learn on the Camino is to welcome each day with a goal. So if you think about, this task of walking across Spain, the whole country, it takes about 15 miles a day for 32 days to walk the entire stretch of the Camino Frances, which is the most popular of the trails. There's many different Caminos. It's a whole network of trails, but about half the people who do it walk the Camino Frances these days. So if you think about that, walking, almost 500 miles in a month, it's just a huge task that you can't even kind of grasp. It sounds crazy. So the key is you just take every day as you have a simple goal that I just need to walk from this village to the next village today. And then if I do that, I've made my progress on my whole month. And if I do that day after day, I'll get across Spain. And it's the beautiful part about the Camino is it's so well marked that your life becomes pretty simple. You just basically, you wake up and then you just follow the yellow arrows and get to your next village. And if you can make it through that day, then you just have to wake up the next day and do it again. And after about, maybe a month of that, you're all the way to Spain. So that there's a lesson in that with on the Camino, because the way you kind of measure that is you get this is the passport that you're all very familiar with. So instead of thinking about how far you're going to get to 500 miles, you just have to make it to your next goal for that day. And the neat part is that you get a stamp along the way, which shows that you've actually walked the Camino. And this document, as you all know, is good for 2 reasons. It both identifies you as a pilgrim, so you can get into the pilgrim-only hostels along the way that are very low cost but are just reserved for pilgrims. But it also is the document that you take at the end of your journey to the office in the cathedral to prove that you've walked the way and qualify for the Compostela certificate. So the lesson you learn on the Camino is that, or when you take away from the Camino, when you go back to your life outside the Camino, whether it's work or your personal life.
Photos.
Camino photos. You learn that if you've got a huge goal, the key is just to break it down into a little goal for that day. So for me, a lot of times, I don't think as much about, if I'm writing a book, for example, I don't think about, oh my goodness, I've got a deadline in 3 months from now, and I've got to have 50,000 words done and all that. I have a goal that, today I want to get 1,000 words done, or I want to get this blog done today, or I have this one meeting today that I really wanted to do well. And if I do that one thing well, I'll feel like the whole day is a success. So it's kind of like the lesson you learn on the Camino is just have one goal every day. And if you do it well, you'll feel like you're making your progress on your longer goals. So the Camino kind of taught me that. You don't have to walk all 500 miles one day. You just have to have a good day and have a good one the next day as well. So that's the first lesson. Welcome each day with a goal. The next lesson, the Camino teaches you to put your challenges into perspective. Because every pilgrim, if you're walking 500 miles or so, every pilgrim has a low point on the Camino. And mine came in my first Camino at about probably like day 8 or something like that. So I had planned out my whole Camino, and then one day I had somehow mistakenly jammed 2 days of walking into one. So I ended up walking about 25 miles on one day, and this is July in Spain, so it's a hot day and other things. So that morning I woke up and I'm sore, I'm blistered, I'm mad at myself for being so stupid the day before, and then I get up and I'm walking, and for about an hour or so I'm just staring at this hill ahead of me, just taunting me. And then, so this is where I had a breakdown. I was like, I just looked up and I said, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. There's no way I'm going to be able to get across Spain, and I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't get an Uber. I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, but I was like, this is by far the most idiotic thing I've ever done in my life. But I didn't really have a choice. So I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And when I got about halfway up that hill, I saw a marker on the side of the hill, and it was to a pilgrim who had died at that spot trying to get up that hill. And seeing that marker really put my head in a better space, because I realized that I was having a bad day, but I was having a bad day doing something I love. And having a bad day doing something you love is probably better than having a good day on a lot of other things. And I also realized that there were a lot of people in the world who would be glad to exchange their challenges for mine that day. So I stopped and I paid respects to the pilgrim who had died at that spot. And then I continued up the hill with a newfound commitment. And when I got to the top of that hill, I saw this beautiful view of the Camino. You may recognize it. And I took this picture, and it's a Camino just winding for miles and miles with pilgrims dotting the way. I bet some of you may have taken the same snapshot, but in many ways that picture changed my life, because when I got back, I wrote a blog about the lessons I'd learned, and I put this picture at the top of the blog, and the blog went viral. It was on LinkedIn. It was one of the top 3 blogs in its space. It was this blog, mine, Sir Richard Branson, and Ariana Huffington for a couple days on LinkedIn at the top, and it went viral. And then so it turned into the book deal. So when I got the book deal, so the blog took off. And then when I got the book deal, the publisher asked me who I wanted to dedicate the book to. And I gave them a name that they were surprised by. I said, I'm going to dedicate it to someone I've never met, because Jose G. Volino, he was the pilgrim who had died on that spot halfway up the hill. And he never got to see that view, but he helped me get to the top of that. So I wanted to let him and let his family know that he had a real impact on my life by helping me get there. So I wanted to make him part of the book journey as well. So that's where you learn to put challenges in perspective that way. So, and nowadays, so this was a picture of one of the readers of the Camino Way who reached that put a stone on his grave there with kind of saying thanks for me, the Camino Way, Victor Prince. So the Camino really teaches you to put challenges into perspective, because, in our work world and in our lives off the Camino, we all have bad days, but when you think about work, on your worst day at work, think about how that compares to when you didn't have a job and you were trying to get that job. And so a lot of times we just have to appreciate what we do have and realize that a lot of people out there would be happy to trade their challenges for ours. And the Camino certainly does that. It challenges you, and you learn to put things in perspective. And that was the story about how that did with me on my first Camino. So that's lesson number 2, put challenges into perspective. Lesson number 3 is what I call remove weapons of mass distraction. So in my first Camino, I did the math, and I'm like, all right, if I'm going to be walking, a month, I love audiobooks. I was like, geez, I better fill up with content, because it's going to be a lot of time walking. So I bought a dozen or so audiobooks, and I had made sure I had all my time filled up. And then on my first day, instead of putting my earbuds in, I said, I'm just going to kind of experience this and do that. So on my first Camino, I started in Pamplona. And that first day, I walked and I didn't put my earbuds in. And then I ended up never putting the earbuds in my entire, that first Camino. That was about 28 days for me. And by doing so, I'd argue that it changed my life, because the experiences I had, the people I met, in many ways, I think about they may not have happened if I'd been buried behind some ear pods. I'd be telling the world that, hey, I'm too busy. I don't want to meet you. I wouldn't be as curious about, like experiencing all the things around me. So, all the way from making friends with a donkey to meeting a priest who was traveling from village to village to give that, to, being in Pamplona during San Fermin, to watching some nuns jam on guitars, all these types of things. I wonder how many of these things I wouldn't have experienced if I'd just been buried behind my earphones, like I often did in the world outside the Camino. And even more than that, so that not having those earbuds in changed my life, because I ended up meeting my girlfriend, my partner on the Camino, Tina. And so we've been together now for 8 years. We met on that first Camino in 2013. So, had I been kind of buried behind my earphones, I may not have met her either. And as an aside, so, you meet a lot of people on the Camino from all over the world. So the interesting part is I live in Indianapolis. Tina lives in Sweden. And we've had this relationship for 8 years now. We've had a deal where we see each other at least every 3 months. And then COVID hit, and it was a little bit harder to do that. But in October, I made it to Sweden using a family travel exemption that you can get through the borders. And the interesting thing was the BBC actually did a story about us in December. And it was like a 4-minute video that was the #1 video on BBC for a day in December about our experience traveling for me going through the border closures to see her. So yeah, if I just rewind, I wonder if my life would have been much different if I'd been in my usual self, but hidden behind my earphones and not met folks like Tina. So, the lesson that you take from the Camino is when you get back to the real world, it's very easy just to bury yourself in your phone or other things. And when you're at a meeting, it's, if you put your phone on the desk and you're kind of telling the person that you're meeting with that I don't even know who's trying to reach me or who might try to reach me, but they're definitely more important than you. So it's our phones are wonderful tools, but when we get consumed by them, they become weapons of mass distraction. And the key is just to focus on the people that you're around and things that you're doing, and tune into that and keep your phone kind of out of bay, because it'll change your life. You may not realize every day what you're not experiencing if you're buried in your phone. So I'm so glad that I learned that lesson on the Camino, to kind of plug into life and take the earphones out. So remove weapons of mass distraction. The next lesson I learned is be the kind stranger. So, everyone gets hit by blisters on the Camino. And on my first Camino, I definitely did it. They started hitting around the town of Nájera, which was, I don't know, 8 or 10 days into my Camino. So I limped to this town and I was going slower than normal. So I got in a little bit late. And then after I cleaned up, I went out to dinner and I met some other pilgrims, and I showed them my blisters because, as you all know, that's what pilgrims do. You show each other your blisters and get trade stories and all that. And everyone's got opinions on how they form and how to cure them and all that. So I showed these other pilgrims my blisters, and they said, that one right there is getting infected. You need to get that treated. And the good news was there was one pharmacy in town and it was open late. So I limped to the pharmacy, and when I got there, the door was closed and there was a close sign on it, but the light was still on. So I didn't knock, but there was an older gentleman in the back sweeping up, and he saw me and he came to the door and he cracked the door open and he said one word to me. He said peregrino, which is the Spanish word for pilgrim. And I said, sí. And then I pointed to my blisters because I didn't know the Spanish word for that. But he said, un momento. And he comes out and he presses the button on that little box outside the door. And he says a bunch of stuff in Spanish that I didn't really catch. And then about maybe 5 minutes later, a very irritated pharmacist shows up. And she asked me what medication I need. And the way she's asking me makes me think that she thinks I need heart medication or something urgent. And I'm like, no, it's just a blister. So she looks at me and then she looks at the old man. And then she says a bunch of stuff in Spanish to the old man that they do not teach you in 7th grade Spanish. But she was not very pleased with that old man and letting him know that that's not the purpose of that emergency call box. But, and he kind of played, I didn't understand the American. He kind of blamed it on me in my attempt to speak Spanish. But since she was there, she went ahead and gave me the antiseptic. And after I paid, the older gentleman, he walked me to the door. And as we got to the door, he shook my hand and he winked at me and he said, buen camino, because he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew he was going to get in trouble, but he saw a pilgrim in need and he decided to be the kind stranger. And when I think about that small act of kindness on his part, it had a huge impact on me, because had I not gotten that blister treated, I may not have finished my Camino. And had I not finished my Camino, I certainly wouldn't have written a book about it. So you never know about how the smallest act of kindness on your part can have just a huge ripple of impact on others. And as a code of that story, so on one of my after the book came out, I got an advance copy, and I went back to Nájera and to give the older gentleman a copy of the book and to let him know how important that was. And unfortunately, he wasn't working there anymore. But yeah. But hopefully he got karma back from that somehow. So the lesson, I think, off the Camino is, if you have a team, if you run a business or whatever, just think about how to be the kind stranger. If you get people calling in, showing up at your door, just have a protocol, have a policy, and let your staff know what they can and can't do to help people come in who are in need, because you never know how that smallest act of kindness on your part might have a huge ripple impact on someone else. So you learn that on the Camino, that many of us experience kind strangers, and we also have a chance to be a kind stranger when we live off the Camino. The next big lesson that I learned is just a simple idea called welcome help. So I was, as I got to the Meseta, the big flat part of Spain towards the middle of the trip, I pulled up in this one village for lunch, and there was only one sandwich shop in the village, and there was this other American couple who were ahead of me. So I walked in there and I ordered my sandwich, and I'm sitting by the window and I'm just looking at, there's not a whole lot in this town to look at, but right across from the restaurant is this corner, and there's these three older gentlemen in the picture, just kind of sitting there, not doing a whole lot. And I was kind of observing them. But then when the other American couple that finished ahead of me got out, they looked outside and they looked around. They couldn't find the yellow arrow to tell them whether to go left or right outside that door. So they kind of like stopped for a minute and then just decided to take a 50-50 chance and went left. And as soon as they went left, these three guys immediately jumped up and started yelling in a nice way, no, go the other way, pointing them. And then so the pilgrim's like, oh, okay. And then so they went the other way. And so I laughed about that. And as I was finishing my sandwich, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I started saying, if there's going to be an arrow anywhere, it's probably behind where the guy in the yellow shirt is sitting. And I was like, all right, these guys are, I think these guys are sitting here on purpose, just waiting for pilgrims who get lost to tell them the right way. So I decided to test it out, and I walked out, and I did the same act, and I on purpose I went the wrong way. And as soon as I did, sure enough, they popped up and said, no, go the other way. And it dawned on me as I was walking after that these folks were sitting there just to help pilgrims out. And then they could have been doing a lot of other things. They could have been sitting inside watching TV or whatever, but they were doing this. They were out there sitting to help people because it was actually a way for them to get enjoyment themselves, that by helping people, they felt better about themselves. So it made me realize that when you welcome help from others, when you accept help, you're actually giving people a gift. Because a lot of us, like giving our advice, giving our opinions, but personally me, I oftentimes when I worked, I didn't want to ask other people for help because I didn't want to feel weak. I didn't want to feel like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want to show vulnerability. But I realized from the Camino that when I do ask for help, I'm giving others a gift by helping them feel important and valued and smart about what they do. So that's something that I now talk about with leaders about. That's one of the biggest things that as a leader, you should not just demonstrate on your own by asking for help, but expect that of your team. Because at the core of it, teamwork is really just people helping each other out. And the key to that is not just helping others, but being willing to receive help from others. Because I've noticed a lot of times, that people get territorial and they don't want to ever ask for help. And that's something I think the Camino taught me. It's important not just to welcome help yourself, but to let people know that you expect them to do it as well. So I think everyone in the Camino learns at some point, whether they get lost or get a blister or other things, they learn to start welcoming help on the Camino. Another big lesson I learned is don't judge people. So this was a picture I took on my first Camino on the first day. So I'd spent a lot of time doing my research and figuring out what to pack and what not to pack in my backpack. And I was very proud of my packing prowess. And then on the first day, I saw this couple, and they were, they backpacked, but then they also had an extra bag. And I just thought, oh my goodness, they are so overpacked. And I remember I took this picture and I put a little snarky comment on Facebook saying, because I wanted to brag about how smart I was in packing. And I use like, oh, these folks are never going to make it. And then to this day, I still feel terrible about that Facebook post. I'm like, why would I ever have to post something negative about someone else to make myself feel better? And so this couple, sure enough, as we started off, this was just after Pamplona. And after I got up that day, we got, when I got to the top of the hill with the Alto de Perdón, I twisted my ankle a little bit. I was kind of slow, and they came up there, and sure enough, they came over and they offered me, food and a drink and everything else. And they were super nice people. And I felt so terrible for doing that. So I've always, it's been a big lesson for me. Don't judge people. And then another lesson I got from, in writing the book, in the book, I interviewed about 100 pilgrims from 16 countries, and they shared their lessons too. And one of my favorite ones is this couple from Australia talked about when they walked the Camino on the first day, as they were walking from Saint Jean to Roncesvalles. They got about to Orson, and they were walking, and there was a couple ahead of them they were both overweight and going very slowly and just struggling. And this couple from Australia, they were very proud of themselves for the training they'd done, and they were like, oh, those two are never going to make it. They didn't think anything about it. And then about a month later, they're in Santiago de Compostela, and they're at the cathedral. And sure enough, that couple that they rode off that first day walk in, and the husband and wife from Australia, they were so changed. They felt so terrible about judging people on that first day that when that couple walked in, the Australians went up and just gave them the biggest hug ever, and were so happy that they finished the Camino. And this other couple were like, who the heck are you? They had no idea who they were, because they didn't recognize those people. But it's just the Camino really changes you and teaches you not to judge people, because everyone on the Camino is basically there for the same reasons, wearing the same clothes, going through the same challenges and all that. And it really, the Camino strips you down in a way where you learn not to judge people by the package they're in, but by the content of their character. And that really, those were a couple lessons I learned that way. Another big one you learn on the Camino is choose who you walk with. And this is a real picture of a real shepherd. You probably all seen those as well. But so on my first day, there's many lessons, but on my first Camino, along the way, I met this woman, and she had this little dog in the picture. And so we were walking together, and the first day we had such a really good time because the dog was running along chasing butterflies, and I love dogs. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And then the next day, though, the sun came out in a much worse way. Instead of chasing butterflies, that dog was running around looking for puddles. I know. So looking for puddles to put his little belly in to cool himself off, and we'd stop for a break, and he was just, he was like tired as could be. And so it dawned on me, like, man, this dog is not going to make the Camino. And I was like, did you check with your vet? And he was his name was Russo.
My dog that looked at me so affectionately. It's like anything in the world, all I know is somewhere, someplace, some dog looked at me. That's all I want. That's how I ever want to be looked at.
Yeah. So, so the lesson I got, this woman, she was all into herself, but she wasn't really thinking about the dog. And then, I kind of had to have an intervention with her. I said, you're going to kill that dog. If he can't walk that way, you got to carry him or figure out some other thing to do. And she was like, she wouldn't really, I could tell that she hadn't really done it, but she wouldn't admit it. So I said, I'm not going to walk with you anymore. I'm not going to support this, And then, she got mad at me, but I did that. And about a day or two later, she did leave the Camino and she got off. But the point was, it was very uncomfortable to have that conversation with another pilgrim, to say, I'm not going to walk with you. I don't approve the way you're doing that, because you never want to judge people. But I realized that, if the reason I was willing to be confrontational with her is if she were, sometimes you walk with people and they're kind of negative with you or whatever, but you kind of put up with it just because you don't want to rock the boat. But I was willing to kind of pull the fire alarm because she was doing that with a dog, and that dog couldn't talk for itself, but I could. So I had to stand up for it. But I realized a lot of the times, we don't do that for ourselves. We at work or other places, we end up spending time with people who are negative, kind of bring us down, and we don't kind of break from them because we don't want to make a scene. But I think the Camino teaches that. One of the great quotes I heard was, if you're walking with someone and you don't really enjoy their company, kind of stop and tie your shoe. And if they can't figure it out, then stop and tie your other one as well, or just like have a little bit longer lunch or whatever. So, don't feel trapped on the Camino. You kind of learn to kind of hang back or go forward if there's someone here that just has different energy. You don't want to ruin your own Camino, maybe not theirs as well. But that's important for life too, which is, a lot of times we just end up staying with toxic people through inertia, but you learn that you don't really have to. Don't let them ruin your Camino. Don't let them ruin your career, your life, or whatever. The next lesson you learn on the Camino is what I call find strangers to find yourself. So as you walk on the Camino, there's people from all over the world doing the Camino for all different reasons. And there's a saying that if you walk on the Camino with someone for an hour, you know everything about them. You know their hopes, their dreams, their biggest fears, what they want to be when a kid, all that kind of stuff, but you don't know their last name. But you get this deep thing where, as you experience that with people, you learn a lot about yourself, because you end up describing yourself and why you're walking the Camino and what you do in life off the Camino and that kind of stuff. And, you end up getting big insights in yourself. And for me, an example of that was I did one of the stories I tell in the book was, I was walking with this guy from California, and he told me his story. He'd been a marketing executive, and he's doing well, making a good living, but wasn't doing it wasn't fulfilled by that. So he decided he was going to become an English high school teacher, and he did. And he was telling me why and the pleasure he got out of that. And as he's telling me that, I was like, man, I kind of want to be a teacher. And then it kind of dawned on me that, actually I've had many different things in my career, jobs, but the one kind of through line that I always loved the most was this training course that I taught. I basically teach the skills that I learned in consulting at Bain & Company, the problem solving communication skills. And I always loved teaching that to my staff. And then I was like, I want to be a teacher someday. And so it dawned on me, like, maybe I could do that for a living. So sure enough, I launched the business doing this corporate training, and I've done it all over the world now. So that conversation really had a big impact on me. It helped me see, by talking to someone else, it helped me see, kind of understand one of my own desires. And then on my book tour, I did a book tour about 25, 30 cities all over the US, Canada, Europe, and even South Africa. And when I was in Los Angeles, the fun part, I told that story. And at the end of it, I said, no, by the way, that teacher lives in Los Angeles and he's here tonight. So Tony, the teacher, was there. So he stood up, and it's the only time when I've done a book tour when people asked someone else to sign the book. So they asked him to sign his page where they told the story. So that was a real fun example of getting to see Tony again and having that come to life. So he was a stranger that helped me find myself. And the key is, in your life outside the Camino, do that as well. Just force yourself to go out of your normal circles, have lunch, coffee with other people, because you learn a lot about yourself when you meet others. So force yourself to get out of your bubble. The next lesson you learn on the Camino is if I walk the Camino, I can do that. So if you do something crazy sounding like walk across Spain, it gives you all kinds of self-confidence to do other stuff. And so for me, that self-confidence came out in, I walked my Camino having no intention of writing a book, but after I'd finished, I was like, geez, if I could do that, maybe I can write a book. So I wrote my first book, and it did better than I thought. It ended up getting translated into Korean as well, and it hit the top 100 list in a bunch of categories in leadership category. So it did better than I thought it would, and it gave me the wherewithal and the confidence to write The Camino Way, which is my third book now. And it's all about doing something crazy like that. An adventure like that gives you a lot of success that you can translate into your professional world and other places. So, think about some, maybe walking across Spain is a little bit crazy, but do things, in your spare time, in your adventure, that kind of build that confidence for you and translate that into other things. So I walk the Camino. If you've walked the Camino, you kind of get a lot of confidence doing other things. The next lesson I learned from writing the book from other people is this lesson called buy the ticket and figure out the rest. And so this was a guy who shared a story with me. He was a big executive out in Colorado, and he'd had a very successful career. He was traveling, he's on airplanes all the time, very focused on his career. And then one day he goes in the office and he gets laid off. And then he's like, so he's thinking about, how am I going to tell my wife this? And he kind of forms a plan. So when he gets home, he tells her the bad news, but he says, honey, this could be a good thing. Remember how we've talked about wanting to do something like walking the Camino across Spain? Well, this is our chance. We can do that. So she looks at him and says, walk across Spain? You don't even like walking the dog. And he was like, well, you know what? We don't have to do it tomorrow. How about we say we're going to do it in 6 months from now? We'll buy the ticket, and then we'll get all the, get ourselves in shape, buy all the equipment, all that kind of stuff. But let's just buy the ticket and we'll figure out the rest. And sure enough, they did, and they walked across Spain. And I think that's a big goal for a lot of people, is that if you've got a big goal, instead of saying it's on my bucket list, I'm gonna do it someday, is actually do something to it, to, whether it's buying a ticket, taking the vacation time off or whatever, put some marker down to commit to doing that at a certain time. And don't, so say, instead of saying I'll do the Camino someday, say I'm going to do it on my 50th birthday or on our 20th anniversary, or when the kids finally leave the house, or whatever it is, put some time frame against it and take some step to get it done. And another way to get a really big goal done is a lesson I called find a train to jump on. So on my Camino tour, I did a little social stop in Louisville, Kentucky, and we just did kind of a Camino happy hour. And so there's a bunch of total strangers showed up, but they were all interested in the Camino. So this one couple, the guy, there's two people there. So they come into this and like, oh yeah, you're going on the Camino again. I said, in fact, yeah, I'm going in August because the book's coming out in Spanish and I'm going to do some events in Spain about it. And I'm like, yeah, you should join me. And he's like, okay, whatever. And then about 2 days later, I get an email from the guy. He's like, were you serious? Because we talked to our boss and we can get the time off. And I'm like, absolutely. So next time, I talked to this guy for maybe 3 minutes in Louisville. I'd never met him before. Next time I see him, and so Paul and Janine was in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, first thing in the morning. And that day we walked over the Pyrenees together, and we walked all the way into Santiago together. So the lesson from that is I give them so much credit for they had this big goal, this crazy goal for them to go to Spain and do this trail. And it was just, they couldn't figure out the first step, but they found a train going there. They found me, happened to go there, and they had the guts to kind of ask if they can join. So, if you've got a big goal, whether it's like, maybe losing weight or learning a language or something, if you find someone else doing it, just jump on that train with them and get going from there. So that was a story about that. And then the last lesson I'll share is drop the stone you are carrying. So there's a tradition on the Camino that when you start, you put a small stone in your pocket or something like that. And at about the 3/4 mark across the Camino Francés, you come to this, it's actually the highest point, called the Crucifero. And here you drop that stone and you commemorate something. So maybe you're remembering a loved one you've lost. Maybe you're saying a prayer for something. Maybe you're dropping off some baggage you have or whatever. So for me on my first Camino, I decided I was going to do two things. I was going to quit feeling sorry for myself about the divorce I'd gone through the year or two before. And then I also decided I was going to finally quit nicotine. And I tried to quit nicotine for many, many times. But then on the Crucifero, I put down a stone and I said, I'm not going to use nicotine anymore. And I tried many times, but that somehow worked. So for 8 years, I've been nicotine free. And I think the reason why is the memory for me of quitting is associated with the Camino. And it's more fun than the memory of using nicotine. So I don't know if it's the crazy way to, not everyone go to the Camino, but what you learn is like, we all carry baggage, and maybe we feel sorry for ourselves about something. Maybe it's a bad habit we have. But when you drop that stone that you're carrying, you realize how heavy it was and how much it slows you down. And for me, the Camino did that. And that's something I encourage everyone to do. So, because it really frees you up when you do that. So to close, and then I'll have you take questions that, if there's one or more of these lessons that really resonate with you and you'd like to apply, there's a few ways to do that. So first is just embrace it. Say, you know what, I really want to drop the stone I'm carrying, or I really want to, welcome each day with just one goal, kind of thing. So pick the one or two things that you really want to do, and then start modeling it. So incorporate it into your daily style of how you work and live your life outside of work, and then communicate that out to your team to say, here's one or two or three things I'm doing, and I want you to do as well. And then start to expect it from your folks. So like a big one I encourage people to do is that welcome help, is that I really encourage you to assess people on how open they are to receiving help from others. Consider putting that into their employee assessments or their competencies to see how much that improves your teamwork, if that's something that you believe. So that's kind of the next steps I tell people on if there's certain things here that resonate and how to do that. So with that, I close and I give people where they can find me. So my Facebook page for the book's got, I think, 14,000 followers. And then I have a whole bunch of videos and pictures on my website, victorprince.com. And then I've got like 50,000 followers on LinkedIn between about 60 with my newsletter and other stuff. So I encourage people to kind of follow me, because I kind of close with, writing the book and all this. It's a bit of a personal mission for me because the Camino changed my life. And I think when a lot of people, it's a life-changing experience. So if I can help people discover the Camino, that's kind of a personal mission for me. So with that, I say buen Camino, and I open it up to questions. So thanks for letting me kind of fire hose, for a while on a topic you already know very well. But that's kind of how I try to introduce leaders around the world to the lessons they can learn from the Camino. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, Victor. Perhaps you can, I'll stop sharing your screen and we can see who might want to have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you. Stop share. All right.
All right.
There we
Thank
go.
you. All right.
Any questions? Anybody?
And you're probably muted, so if you want to ask a question, I will let you unmute yourself, or let's see.
Yeah, I tell people the goal with the book is that not everyone can do the Camino, that, maybe they can't get out of work, or they may not be able to physically do it. But if the book and other things help share some of the lessons you can get, I think that's a positive I'm trying to do with the book. Did anyone else? I'd love to hear if anyone else took lessons that you really think would be good additions, or other things as well that really, how the Camino has helped you in your life after the Camino.
Well, Victor, I really want to thank you for sharing with us. I think all those points were very well taken, and I can see where leaders can really learn from that. I was actually a professional at a Fortune 500 company when I did my first Camino, and within 2 years, I had basically left and changed my life. So, I agree with you. We can really change our lives by walking, and I honor you and your authorship and your ability to write books. It's totally cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, fine. Because one of the reasons I decided to write it was because you don't find many kind of business executives or I didn't experience that many kind of people who led large teams that at least I'd met on the Camino. And I thought that my inspiration for the book is I was walking. I just left my last job where I had about 350 people reporting to me. And as I'm learning these lessons on the Camino, just how to be a more welcoming person. And I was very type A, kind of driven. And I'm sitting there, and particularly those values on the back of the American Pilgrim's passport, the 7 Spirit of the Camino. I was like, geez, I wish I'd lived these as a leader, because I would have been such a better leader. My people would have probably enjoyed their work more. And I thought, man, I would have been such a better person if I'd done this. So I kind of wrote that book for me, for the Victor before the Camino, and that's kind of who I think it's resonating with.
Any other questions?
Do you know the history of how the Spirit of the Camino got on the back of the American Pilgrim's passport? Because they're so beautifully written.
I know it was done. I don't know the story. It was done prior to the existing board and the value statement. So it was there before that. I haven't heard the story. Maybe Sarah or Tom may know. I know they're here, so I don't know, let them jump in if they know the story. But it was certainly a unique way of looking at it, pulling it out. And the interesting story for me on that is that when I interviewed for the job for the board, that was one of the things that I brought up, and Dave, the chair, also said he has it. And I actually have it posted, or I used to when I was working in the office. I had those 7 values posted, or 7 posted on my in my office, so I could look at it every day, and it reminded me. And Dave actually does the same. So, in my, one of the reasons why I invited you was because we have 58 chapters across the country, and I have 50 or 104 plus or 130 plus folks here, including ones here tonight, that are leaders in those chapters. They're responsible for. They're the boots on the ground, and I thought it would be something interesting that we could all share and have some commonality around doing the Camino and understanding the fact that we all are leaders in our own way and in terms of running the chapter. So I wanted to thank you first of all, I personally like to thank you for participating and coming tonight to speak with us. It was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for doing what you do. I'm a huge fan of APOC, and I direct people to APOC all the time when, it's a place to go to get like the real high quality, unbiased information about the Camino and things like that. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. In fact, I've been tithing part of my royalties back to APOC, and I'm a lifetime member. So just kind of as thanks for inspiring me with the Spirit of the Camino.
I got a question, Victor, if I can.
Yeah.
Like Bill said, chapter coordinators here on the meeting, and one of the challenges that we in our chapter continue to face is dealing with technology and the change of technology. And I realize that all of us have different gifts and skills, and the old saying that you don't want to put a round peg in a square hole. I get that. But your thoughts on how do you bring your team up to a level of technology so that it's not falling on 1 or 2 people and they're the only ones that know, and then they get burnt out. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I keep going back to the most powerful thing I think I learned on the Camino is welcome help and ask people for help. And because realizing when, so there's people, some people who walk the Camino are very social and others kind of walking on their own, but they still want to be social. Maybe they're kind of introverted. And so those people who are helping you, if you've got, you know, one or two very tech savvy people who are helping out there, so talk to them, because they may be getting they might feel very rewarded by helping others, you know, and it might be their way to be able to connect with people if they, you know, if they're not good with small talk and that kind of stuff. So, you know, don't assume it's all burden for them. You definitely want to talk to them and see that, but see what, you know, what their motivation is for doing that. And if there's other ways that maybe you can motivate other people to help out as well, would be one thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I've done 5 Caminos now. I've got a ton of pictures, and if and I do videos along when I do Caminos now. I have a little camera. I do videos where I teach different lessons from the Camino as well. So it's kind of it's fun to do that because there's a bit of a following for it now.
Victor,
hi, my name's. Go ahead, someone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Rachel. I just wondered if you have done 5 different Caminos, or have you done the Frances every time?
I've gotten 3 Compostelas, and I've walked the Frances multiple times. Like I've done the whole thing from Pamplona to Santiago. And then I've done the Portuguese, last 100K, the Portuguese. I've done the last 100K, or I've done the Camino Inglés. I've done the Finisterre and the French Way. So, but I keep going. My favorite part is the first 2 weeks of the French Way. I've done that one 3-4 times now.
I have a quick question. Do the lessons that you wrote, that you have that are in the book, is that from your first Camino? And if so, have other things come forward as lessons that you continually add, perhaps on your blog or in your teaching? And what are some other things that you've added in further Caminos?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the book is all from my first Camino. So that's when I did from Pamplona to there. So I got kind of the full Camino experience, just shy of the Pyrenees. But so what I like about that is I just left kind of the corporate, the government work world. I just got out of that job of, you know, with very high pressure political executive jobs in DC. So it was very fresh for me. Like here, I was an executive who was walking the Camino. So it was really, the lessons were written for leaders like that. And then now what I do is I walk every time now, you always learn from the Camino. So like, just like you said, so I ended up doing new blogs and stuff, and I add to them, and I tweak this presentation. So the book itself is organized into the chapters are actually, there's 8 chapters, one for each of the values and the spirit of the Camino. And then I do 3 lessons under each one. And then I do some other, so the book itself is about 30 lessons then I do kind of a before and after of here was Victor before the Camino, here's Victor after the Camino. And then I asked people from around on Facebook, actually, I asked other pilgrims if they'd be willing to share their stories, and about 100 replied from 16 countries, and dozens of those stories made it into the book, as well as a kind of a way to give a lot of perspectives on these lessons. So now I add to them, and like, so the lessons you'll see now, some of those are from the new ones, like that. I love that one, jump on the train, because that was such a fun experience, like from the book tour, you know, to live that live and kind of do that. That was stuff like, so I'm always kind of growing that. So it's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great. Love it.
Victor, I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. I listened to your audiobook of this book as I was walking and training to go in May of 2019 on the Camino. So thank you. One of these days when my schedule allows and the thing pops up, I'm going to listen to your conversations on Clubhouse. So really looking forward to that one day. One of the lessons that I've learned, especially these past 18 months, when all of us have kind of been forced into a diet of being adaptive leaders of organizations, is it's not even how you put it, it's kind of take the next good step, you know, assess and then take the next good step. And, you know, especially some of the hard days on the Camino, it's, just get the next good step in.
Yeah. It's like, you got to break it down, the big goal, break it down. Like, we don't have to figure out the whole year right now. Let's get through Wednesday, you know, and let's make Wednesday a good one. And then we'll make Thursday a good one. But just, you know, you have the goal where you're trying to get to, but just do it one day at a time. You learn that on the Camino, and that's definitely true nowadays. I'll tell you a quick funny story about, I was on the Camino two Caminos ago, and then I was sitting there and I bought a pizza. And it was in Nájera of all places. So I bought a pizza, and it was too much. And there was another Camino group there, and there was this a couple Korean folks there. And I said, "Oh, by the way, you know, I wrote a book. My book's coming out in Korean." And they're like, "Oh, what book is it?" And I have this little card the book cover. So I show them the book cover of the Camino Way, and this woman starts like screaming in a good way, and it's this Indonesian couple. It was this couple, and then they carried their like 4-year-old daughter on their back. And then, so this woman starts screaming, and she goes to her husband, you know that book you read that told you about the Camino and got us here? The author just bought you a piece of pizza. It was a total small world Camino story. Things like that happen to Camino all the time. That it was total wild thing, but it's kind of a fun mission to help people discover the Camino. And also, you mentioned Clubhouse. So I've built a club on Clubhouse. For those not familiar, Clubhouse is this new social network, but it's audio only. And like the world needs another social network, but this one is actually I'm a fan of because it's all through human voice. There's no posting stuff, so people are actually humans. So I created the Camino Club on there, and we're getting it's almost 1,000 people. And I do a weekly meeting, and one of my co-hosts you might know is Yosmar Martinez. She was very involved in APOC for a while, so she co-hosts with me. We just had one today. So if any of you get on Clubhouse, or if you join my Facebook page, the hashtag is the Camino Way book. I'll post invites to those Clubhouse things, and you can follow that link and join Clubhouse and hear the link there. So it's kind of fun because people from around the world jump on, and people who are interested in doing the Camino, they can basically ask me and other people who've walked it, questions to encourage them or other things. So yeah, try out Clubhouse if you have an appetite for yet another social network. It's a lot more friendly than Facebook though. Yeah. So is this, so if, yeah, I know we're at time. So if I'm hogging your meeting or whatever, you guys can go ahead and do the rest of your business.
No, we were just meeting for you tonight. That was it. We don't have any other business. We're just basically taking the time to hear your presentation and enjoy your company. So thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you thinking of me, Bill. Yeah. It's so I remember meeting you in Chicago because I did that little happy hour for the Camino. And that's so when I have business meetings or other stuff in different cities, I'll just put an invite on Facebook. And I swear, like in any city of 100,000 people, I'll get like 12 to 20 people, just meet up at some random spot. And that's where I met Bill. So it's been fun.
It's been fun.
Yeah. Thank you for all you guys do. Thank you for what you do. I'm a huge fan of APOC, and you guys do wonderful work. So thanks for serving.
It's our pleasure. It's really our pleasure. And so when we have all our people, and it's all good, all good.
Yeah, you do great work, David. You do such a wonderful job.
We've got a great group of people, though. It's not just me. So,
yeah.
So thanks again, Victor. We really appreciate your time. And thanks to all of you coordinators who could participate tonight. I hope that, this is, if nothing else, it's really great memories of the Camino, right? But I hope that you could share that with your co-coordinators or your chapter, maybe as you groom future coordinators.
oh, and I think we're going to have another one in June. Is that we're having another coordinator meeting in June?
That's the plan, I think. I don't know. I haven't heard the results yet because I know you guys met last night.
So. I think it might be June 9th.
Okay.
We'll have another great Hoosier speaker.
I'm going to say, give us a little preview what you're going to talk about.
The St. James celebration. So on the campus of St. Mary's College at Notre Dame, Indiana. And I hear the people, the ladies who go to St. Mary's say, where's Notre Dame? Of course, it's across the street. Okay, I've got to go.
Thanks, Dave. We'll be posting that on the Facebook page too for the chapter coordinators. And of course, an email will go out as well. So thanks, everybody.
Bye now.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Buen Camino. Buen Camino.
Buen Camino.
Buen Camino.